Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Mr. President, inquiry of the clerk. Does that complete the calendar?
Yes, sir.
Is there other business to come before the Senate? The Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Mr. President, having voted on the prevailing side by which we went by for the day on House Bill 259, I would move that we reconsider that motion.
The question is, shall the Senate reconsider the vote by which House Bill 259 was passed by for the day? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 37, noes 1.
Ayes 37, noes 1. The motion is agreed to. Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Mr. President, I would move that we reject the committee's substitute. The recommendation, I guess, would be to adopt the substitute, and I would request that we reject that substitute.
Thanks, Senator. With a recommendation that it be rejected, the question is, shall the Senate adopt the committee substitute? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The committee substitute is rejected. The Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Mr. President, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute that I wish to have the clerk's office distribute to the members, please.
The Senate will stand at ease pending the distribution of the floor substitute.
Let me do this piece of it. Yep, okay. Mr. President. Mr. President.
So just 1 second, Senator. Still distributing. So. Senate will come to order. The floor substitute having been distributed. Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Mr. President, I would move that we waive the reading of the floor substitute.
The question is, shall the reading of the floor substitute be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor substitute is waived. Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Mr. President, I would like to move for the adoption of the floor substitute. Speaking to the motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, this floor
Senator from
substitute.
James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I apologize for interrupting the senator as he started to embark on his presentation on it. Mr. President, pursuant to Rule 47A.6, I would respectfully move that we limit the debate on this issue to 15 minutes, and this is merely the adoption of a floor substitute, not the ultimate vote on it.
Mr. President,
For what purpose does the senator rise?
speaking to the motion, Mr. President.
Senator, I'm sorry, this is a non-debatable motion. Pursuant to Rule 47A.6, the motion of the senator from James City County is to limit debate on the adoption of the floor substitute to 15 minutes. It is a non-debatable procedural motion. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Debate will be limited to 15 minutes. Debate will terminate at 3:46 p.m. Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Mr. President, as I moved prior, I would move that we adopt the floor substitute, and speaking to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, the floor substitute contains two different components. As it passed the House last year, the bill included technical adjustments to the House districts throughout the state, and the changes involved 43 districts in 18 localities, and the House continued to observe a 1% population deviation as was established in its 2011 redistricting criteria. Some requested changes but were not included in the bill because it would have resulted in the population deviation in excess of that 1%. The floor substitute includes some additional changes based on local needs. It recognizes precinct line adjustments in Bedford County. It makes adjustments in districts in the cities of Suffolk, Chesapeake, and in Albemarle, Fluvanna, Fairfax, and Loudoun counties. The House portion of this substitute now adjusts 49 districts in 21 localities. Mr. President, the second component of the substitute contains updates to the Senate district maps that were passed by the General Assembly in 2011. As those who were here then will recall, the 2011 redistricting process was not this body's finest hour. The map was produced, was lambasted for dividing too many localities, splitting too many precincts, having high deviations between districts, violating basic standards of compactness, and discounting communities of interest. After the governor vetoed the initial plan, the Senate approved the current maps. While these represented a modest improvement over the initial plan, they fell far short of resolving the concerns of addressing the deficiencies commonly expressed. Mr. President, we did not realize in 2011, when the current districts were drawn, that the map left the Commonwealth open to litigation under the Voting Rights Act in a 1980 Supreme Court ruling in the case Thornburg versus Jingles. The court set up a three-pronged threshold test to determine the necessity of creating a majority-minority district. According to the court, if a minority group is sufficiently large and compact and is politically cohesive, and if there is a demonstrated history of racially polarized voting in the region, then the threshold has been met. In applying this test, we must consider the totality of the circumstances test. No one can dispute the racially polarized voting is present in Virginia, and that the totality of circumstances are met. This is particularly true in Southside Virginia. Mr. President, in 1991, the totality of these three factors led to the creation of 5 majority African American Senate districts in Virginia, a substantial increase over the previous 2. In that fall's elections, the Senate reached a modern high point in electing 5 African American senators. And for the past 22 years, these 5 districts have consistently elected African American senators, while no other district in the state has. That is why, Mr. President, I'm honored to present before you a revised Senate district map that includes Virginia's 6th majority-minority district. The new district, labeled in your handouts as number 25, the 25th district, has an African American population of 56.2%, stretching across Southside Virginia. It will provide the opportunity for rural African Americans in Virginia to elect their own representatives to the Senate. And it has been drawn without an incumbent senator to truly provide an opportunity for this community. The plan before you achieves this while retaining the 5 districts with African American populations of at least 55%. These new districts are drawn in full compliance with Virginia's traditional redistricting criteria. Therefore, it appears that if litigation were brought under the Voting Rights Act, this plan would have a very high likelihood of success. Mr. President, I have studied the map of Virginia over the past year, and I have come to realize that in Southside Virginia, the jingles factors are present. There is a large and reasonably compact African American community. They are politically cohesive, and the racial groups demonstrate polarization of voting preferences. The totality of circumstances test is met. Therefore, it is necessary for this new district to be created. And our failure to do so would leave us vulnerable to litigation to force the creation of this district, and rightfully so. I wish to avoid litigation, saving the Commonwealth the time, money, and human resources necessary to defend it. I wish to avoid the litigation. Mr. President, the plan before you adheres to all of the criteria established by the Senate P&E Committee. The districts are compact and contiguous. They're roughly equal in population. They protect and maintain community of interest and adhere to the principles of the Voting Rights Act. This plan, in fact, meets all the criteria of the districts currently in effect. The principle of one person, one vote is always critical in considering district maps. The current plan has a deviation of plus or minus 2%, meaning there are a population swing of 8,000 districts, 8,000 individuals per district between the districts. The proposed map has a deviation of plus or minus 1%, meaning that the maximum population swing is 4,000 people, half the current rate. The proposed districts split 41 localities and cause a total of 60 splits. Both numbers are improvement over the current districts, which have 46 localities split and 78 splits in precincts. As I've already discussed, the proposal adheres completely with the principles of the Voting Rights Act. This map is consistent with the testimony offered during the House and Senate public hearings of 2011. Mr. President, in April of 2011, we gathered to work on the
What
current...
purpose does the senator rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
The senator has the floor.
Under the rule that has just been voted on and adopted, does the senator from Powhatan get to use the entire 15 minutes?
Senator, there was no limitation on how the 15 minutes could be used. If the senator from Powhatan uses the entire 15 minutes, then he would use the entire 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 2011, former Governor Doug Wilder penned an op-ed piece in the Richmond Times-Dispatch that addressed this very issue. He said in that op-ed piece that the redistricting plans could unnecessarily shortchange minorities in the Virginia General Assembly and also have unintended consequences for the congressional delegation. Back in 1990, when we were drawing legislative lines, it was presented to me that Virginia could have a map drawn that could potentially seat 10 black members of the House of Delegates and could have as many as 3 minority districts in the Senate. The House voted for 8 minority districts instead of the 10. As governor, I wanted to see 10 districts. And Mr. President, it goes on in his commentary, and he explains, he said, I was shocked to discover that the Legislative Black Caucus wasn't at all interested in having the maximum of 10 minority House districts and 5 majority minority Senate districts. So far have we advanced with regard to the Black Caucus here in Virginia today. Recently, the Legislative Black Caucus has made aware that as many as 13 majority-minority districts could be drawn during this round of redistricting. The reaction of the caucus is puzzling. The scene was almost a perfect reproduction of what happened in 1990.
What purpose does the senator rise?
Mr. President.
The senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I will admit that it's been a year since we've been together, but do we amend on third reading?
Senator, it is a House bill.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins.
Is less representation in the General Assembly, and I'm again quoting former Governor Wilder, is less representation in the General Assembly a better result of the constituents that the members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus purport to represent? Mr. President, I hope that we will heed the wisdom of Governor Wilder and adhere to the provisions of the Voting Rights Act by enacting this plan. It will clean up the lines, it will protect us from the threat of litigation, and it will provide an excellent opportunity to allow the demographics of this Senate to more closely align with those of the Commonwealth at large. Again, Mr. President, I move that we renew the motion to adopt the amendments.
Thank you, Senator. The junior senator from Henrico, Senator McEachin.
Mr. President, I rise for a substitute motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I move to re-refer this bill to the Committee on Privileges and Elections, and speaking to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, we often talk about legislating on the fly. This
President, parliamentary inquiry.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, and I apologize for the senator from Henrico for interrupting him. Mr. President, my parliamentary inquiry, is this an appropriate substitute motion?
The primary motion is that the committee substitute be adopted. The substitute motion is that the bill be re-referred to the Committee on Privileges and Elections. But it is a proper motion subject to action of the Senate. Junior senator from Henrico, Senator McEachin.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, we often talk about the dangers of legislating on the fly. Well, this is the ultimate in that danger. We ought to send this bill back to Privileges and Elections for any number of reasons. One is that we haven't had public testimony in 2013 on this issue and on these districts. The public has no idea what we're about to do by adopting this substitute, nor would they know in the next 3 days that it would take for this, or the next day that it would take for this bill to ultimately pass. Number two, Mr. President, we have had a great deal of cooperation during this session. We've had a lot of dialogue about a number of things, trying to make sure that the Senate moves forward in an orderly process. To take 15 minutes to shove this down the throats of this side of the aisle, I would submit to you, will put the tenor of this session in grave danger, Mr. President. Mr. President, this bill will lead us to no good at doing it this way. We ought to be deliberative about it. We ought to take our time about it and see if all the things that the senator from Powhatan has said are in fact true. I do not mean to suggest that he means to mislead us. But the senator from James City County said to me in a joking manner that this is like trying a case, and I suggested to him that there ought to be a little discovery done. And indeed, we need to put this bill back into the Privileges and Elections Committee to do that discovery, to have those hearings. We don't have another election for 2 years. There is no rush to do this. If we are to do this, let us do it in a considered and orderly manner, consistent with the traditions of this Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator. The time allocation agreed to by the Senate having expired, the Senate will proceed to vote. The substitute motion is that the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Privileges and Elections. All in favor of that motion, for what purpose does the Senator rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
Senator has the floor.
If, in fact, one did not want this bill recommitted to the Privileges and Elections Committee, should they vote red on this situation?
It is a voice vote preliminarily, but an aye vote would recommit the bill. A no vote the bill would remain on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The question before the body is, shall the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Privileges and Elections? Those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. There being at least 8 hands, there will be a recorded vote. The question is, shall the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Privileges and Elections? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
17, noes 22.
Ayes 17, noes 22. The motion is rejected. The Senate will proceed to a vote. The senator from Prince William, Senator Colgan.
Mr. President, having voted on the prevailing side by which the substitute was agreed to, I move we reconsider that vote.
The question is, shall the Senate reconsider the vote by which it rejected the motion to recommit the bill to the Committee on Privileges and Elections? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. That motion is agreed to. The question before the body is once again, shall the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Privileges and Elections? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. There being at least 8 hands, there will be a recorded vote. The question is, shall the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Privileges and Elections? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 19, noes 20.
Ayes 19, noes 20. The motion is rejected. The Senate will proceed to vote on the primary motion, which is, shall the floor substitute be adopted? All in favor of adopting the floor substitute will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. There being at least 8 hands, there will be a recorded vote. The question is, shall the floor substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 20, noes 19.
Ayes 20, noes 19. The floor substitute is adopted. The senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins. The senator has, for what purpose does the senator rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 47A6, I would move that the debate be limited to 30 minutes and that it be apportioned 15 minutes for those in favor of the motion and those for 15 minutes who may be opposed to the motion, sir. Thanks,
Senator. The question is, pursuant to Rule 47A6, shall debate on the pending motion, which is the passage of the bill, be limited to 30 minutes to be divided evenly between those speaking in favor of the motion and those speaking in opposition to the motion. All in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Madam Clerk and staff will do their best to keep track of the time. The debate will terminate at 4:19 p.m. Senator from Powhatan, Senator Watkins, and each side will be limited to no more than 15 minutes. That motion is before us, sir.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I realize that the introduction of this particular amendment may be a surprise, but But I would say to my colleagues, all 39 colleagues of the Senate, that there has been, over the last 2 years, much discussion, many meetings, and many public hearings that have been held across Virginia with regard to redistricting. This plan will meet the test with regard to the Voting Rights Act. This plan will meet the requirement that an additional minority-majority seat be established. This plan will reduce the deviation with regard to the populations in the districts. It seemed to me to be somewhat unrealistic for us to have a plan that in fact met a less stringent standard, particularly with regard to deviation, than that of the House of Delegates, and indeed in that of the congressional districts that were drawn by this House and this Senate, which brought the deviation down to just about 0. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I think that it is incumbent upon us to adopt a plan that truly more represents Virginia and the makeup, the demographics of Virginia. I have provided, and on everyone's desk is a map, and I have also provided a spreadsheet that details the populations across those particular districts. I also want to bring to your attention one other piece of information that I have. We surveyed the district, the new 6th district, with regard to representation. There are a list of approximately 74 individuals, 74 dedicated individuals, and this is not necessarily all-inclusive, but these are African American individuals who currently reside in this district, this new district, and currently hold positions in this new district of everything from members of the House of Delegates to mayors to commissioners of revenue to treasurers to city council members to boards of supervisors and to school board members. 74 individuals with the potential to bring representation, more equitable representation, to the Senate of Virginia. For that reason, Mr. President, I urge that we pass this legislation.
Thank you, Senator. The Senior Senator for Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, the senior senator mentioned how there were hearings all around the state. I don't think there were any hearings around the state on this plan and how it would pass the Voting Rights Act. I don't have to remind you the plan we had before it passed the Voting Rights Act. The other thing, there will be litigation. You can pretty much be sure of that. The Virginia Constitution, by the way, and it was inserted in there in 2004, says that the General Assembly shall redistrict in 2011 and every 10 years thereafter. They had a similar provision in the Colorado Constitution, and they decided that they wanted to do it in a year that wasn't in the year after the census, and their Supreme Court struck it down. And I got a feeling if we have all these so-called strict constructionists that we've put on the Supreme Court, that's exactly what's going to happen to this. I don't think, you all have done yourself any good, and I don't have to remind you the collateral damage from this thing is going to be immeasurable. But it is what it is, and I understand the numbers game, having been here as long as I have. But I got a feeling this isn't the last we've heard of this.
Thank you, Senator. The junior senator from Henrico, Senator McEachin.
Mr. President, speaking to the motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I'll just speak briefly. I have to tell the other side of the aisle how deeply touched I am by their concern for the Voting Rights Act and by their concern for increasing the influence of African Americans in this Commonwealth, given the fact that when given an opportunity to do so last year in creating a second congressional district that would have been at least minority influenced, they declined to do so. Mr. President, I have to echo the comments of the senior senator from Fairfax by saying the collateral damage on this will be immeasurable. The good working spirit that this Senate has had during these first few days of this session, I suspect will come to a very quiet and a very sudden end, given the attitude of the other side. Not only to do this by surprise, and by the way, Mr. President, I asked for a heads up about this, as far back as November, but not only to do this by surprise, but to rush it through in a day, even though they control the Committee on Privileges in Elections, to decline to send it back down to P&E for a full hearing where the people of Virginia can hear and testify as to what is happening here. No, this is doing things in the dark of night, so to speak. Make no mistake about it. This is not the light of day in which you are operating under. This is sneaky, this is underhanded, and it's beneath the dignity of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker.
Mr. President, I rise to speak against the motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President and members of the Senate, the Virginia Constitution states, quote, "The General Assembly shall reapportion the Commonwealth into electoral districts in accordance with this section in the year 2011 and every 10 years thereafter." There is no provision for reapportionment in any year that doesn't end in one. This amendment was adopted, this language in the Constitution was adopted in a 2004 amendment. Furthermore, the Constitution clearly does not contemplate redistricting in other years, because it does not address when any such changes would take effect. The Constitution states that when the decennial reapportionment law takes effect, but what district boundaries are to exist until the next elections and how vacancies would be filled. But it makes no reference whatsoever regarding redistricting in any other years. This issue was addressed just last year by a Richmond Circuit Court judge. That judge stated that the language in the Constitution limits the authority of the General Assembly to redistrict to 2011 and every 10 years thereafter, and does not allow subsequent redistricting, which is what this bill would do. Furthermore, the judge cited as one of the reasons for making that ruling that this would preclude the politically convenient redistricting whenever one political party or the other might gain the upper hand and find it attractive to redraw boundaries to consolidate power. As referenced by the senior senator from Fairfax, there have been other court cases and other decisions in other states. The Colorado Constitution has language that's similar to ours, although it's even a little bit weaker than ours. The Colorado Supreme Court in 2003 found that a redistricting bill to be unconstitutional because the provision ensuring the general election is limiting and effectively prohibits subsequent redistricting. The Colorado Supreme Court did that even though the General Assembly, the legislature of Colorado, had not acted and had not passed a bill. So it wasn't redoing what they had done. The Colorado districts at that time were drawn by the courts because the Colorado legislature during 2001 and 2002 had been unable to reach an agreement on that. The Colorado court also looked at what other states had done, and it reviewed provisions of states across the country. It found that some states explicitly authorize redistricting, quote, at any time, or, quote, from time to time, and that a few states have no language regarding it. But except in states with such provisions or with no provision, it states, no, quote, state's highest court has interpreted its constitution to allow redistricting more than once per decade. So you have the clear language of our Constitution, you have the decision of the circuit court judge here in Richmond regarding our language in our court, and you have decisions made in Colorado and many other places that make it clear that this type of action is not permissible under the Constitution. I'm sure some could say, well, there have been redistricting done in previous decades. And yes, there have. Generally, they've been fairly small redistricting, not the massive redistricting proposed in this particular bill. But what is different now is that we had an amendment to the Constitution that was adopted in 2004 that tightened things up and made other provisions that made it clear that redistricting was to be done only in years ending in 1. We have a circuit court ruling here in Richmond that has ratified that particular position and has specifically stated that that was done to prohibit politically convenient redistricting. And we have decisions in other states and the statement of the Colorado Supreme Court that not only was the first time redistricting done by the Colorado General Assembly not permitted because the previous decision had been done by the court, but also that they could find no other state that did not have provisions either was silent on the issue of when redistricting had been done or clearly allowed it, that no other state had ever, state's highest court had ever ruled that such redistricting could be done. This issue is something that is going to cause great concern within this body. It's something that clearly, if it moves forward, will be challenged in court, and it's something that almost certainly will be overturned in court. To go through this process when that is what the Constitution of Virginia says, what the court here in Virginia has already said, a lower court, a circuit court here in Virginia said, and when state Supreme Courts across the country have made these types of rulings, I find simply unconscionable.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Newport News, Senator Miller.
Mr. President, speaking against the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Well, if there was ever a reason for a creation of a bipartisan redistricting commission, this is it. No matter how you cloak it, doing this thing now is not right. As we've just heard, we redistrict in years ending in 1. And we have now opened the door to redistricting every time the majority in this body changes hands. This is the wrong time. It's the wrong plan. I hope we'll reject this bill.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the bill pass? All in favor of the motion will record. I'm sorry, the senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Morrison.
Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Given the nature of the length of this bill and the fact that it was just brought to the floor today as a substitute, we haven't had a chance to read through it. I'd ask that this bill go by for the day.
The primary motion is that the bill pass. A substitute motion is that the bill go by for the day. The question is on the substitute motion. The question is, shall the bill go by for the day? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. There being at least 8 hands, there will be a recorded vote. The question is, shall the bill go by for the day? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 19, noes 20.
Ayes 19, noes 20. The motion is rejected. The question is, shall the bill pass? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 20, noes 19.
Ayes 20, noes 19. The bill passes. Are there other matters to come before the Senate?